Hello and welcome to a special live edition of the Berlinale 2023. We are about midway through the festival and I'm joined once again by the esteemed film journalist Jared Abbott. Welcome back to the show so soon.
Thank you for having me back, Redmond.
It's a pleasure to have you. So we are now located in The Place, and The Place is a kind of rebrand of the Berlin Mall, and inside the place there's the Manifesto Market, which is a kind of yuppie, card-only food market, which is a bit more like London. So Potsdamer Platz is always reinventing itself, but is the Berlinale? That's the key question we will go into today. So we are still going to talk about the Panorama, because this is the section that both of us have seen the most films in, and it also has quite a lot of interesting movies that are definitely worth talking about. So let's maybe start with our favorites. Jared, what film really stood out for you?
I would say that the Teacher's Lounge was really great. That was the first one that one of the first ones we saw, and it stuck with me throughout the entire run. It's just this tight little German morality tale, I guess you would say, about you can explain the synopsis a little bit better than me, probably.
I think maybe the Teacher's Lounge actually was my favorite one as well, because it's kind of a horror, comedy, drama, all rolled into one, but it has a really nice command of tone. So it's this woman who's she's German, but her background is Polish. In Germany, they call it like a Migration Hintergrund, which means like where your family came from. And this is always sort of maybe weighing a bit in the background, as she has really a weird control over her class, especially in the way she does this clapping thing, right? So I'll stand away from the mic and she goes, and then the students will be like, and it's really cheesy at the time. And we slowly see her lose this sense of control as things start to unravel in the classroom.
Maybe explain the the incident that sends everything into disarray.
So I'm trying to rack my brain what actually happened. Basically, in the school, there is a culture of fear and resentment because someone has been stealing things from the teacher's lounge, and no one knows who it is. But this woman, like many young teachers, is very idealistic, and she wants to show that her students, many of whom are being racially profiled perhaps, aren't as bad as it seems. So she records on her laptop her jacket with her wallet inside, and then remind me what happens. She sees someone comes in and takes it, and then this really starts this crazy paranoid nuts film, which is much cleverer than it initially seems on the surface, and I really like that one.
I really enjoyed it too. Pretty much everything about it, the acting, the way it looked. It's kind of shot like a TV movie, but I think that works in the film's advantage, and keeps the keeps everything sort of contained into one place.
And it's characteristic of a lot of films in Panorama which are quite intense, and they really push the envelope in terms of what the main character might go through. One, for example, is Heroica, which previously played at Sundance and is now in the Berlinale, and it's about a man in the Mexican army and all the kind of hazing rituals that they do, and the bullying, and what it takes to sort of rise to the top to become a commissioned officer there. And that was really cool. What did you think about Heroica?
I thought it was great. I really liked the way that it plays around with sort of fascist aesthetics. Every time that they're in training, it's kind of shot like a
Leni Riefenstahl.
That's the one. And yeah, I just thought it was really intense all the way throughout. I thought there was really beautiful cinematography. There's this great shot of him looking out into a landscape next to an eagle. And
yeah, the film really leans into fascist aesthetics, I think, and in an interesting way that kind of adds to the surrealism of what he's going through. But this is also punctuated by a few dream sequences, which I don't think landed that well and might not have been needed.
I would agree that the dream sequences are the one thing that kept taking me out of the film, and especially in the third act when the tension was supposed to be, as ratcheted up as possible, it kind of takes these little pauses that I felt like were absolutely not necessary.
But it still definitely shows David Zanana to be a filmmaker with a very distinctive style, especially as this is a kind of film that has been done quite a lot. An Officer and a Gentleman comes to mind, like Full Metal Jacket also comes to mind, but this actually distinguishes itself through its very unique style and is a very controlled and interesting film. One film which maybe evinces less style and less polish is Drifter, which is probably the most low-key film in the program in terms of its aesthetics, but I still thought it to be quite an enjoyable and interesting movie, and considering what it does, I think better than Passages, actually. So, Jared, can you tell us a little bit about Drifter and what you liked about it?
I think Drifter is a really strong debut. It's made by this guy named Hannes Hirsch. I think he's in his early 30s. He lives in the city. And I think there's a lot going for it. It has a lot of style. There's some really good, dance and club sequences. I don't think we talked about the plot, but it's about a young guy who moves to the city and his boyfriend breaks up with him shortly after, and then he sort of sets off on this, sort of self-discovery, this odyssey of self-discovery in the club scene and, hooking up with other guys. So it's short, it has a lot of energy. I like the visual style. My main problem with the film is like the dialogue. It just felt like it could just use a little work and go a little bit deeper. It felt like there wasn't a lot of subtext to it. It felt just kind of boring. And there's multiple scenes of people just talking about like, do you want some K? Do you want some speed? And I just needed a little bit more from the dialogue. But it's recommendable.
What I liked about it is it kind of reminded me of one half of this French film called Sorry Angel, which I saw in Cannes like 6 years ago. And the one half is this young gay man who has a lot of sex and sleeps around. And what was very refreshing compared to some other films I've seen is that you can tell it was made from a queer perspective. So there's none of the usual bullshit that you might get with gay narratives. So this one sort of just takes you right in and really explores the scene of someone who's really trying to explore himself sexually and understanding kind of what that means actually. And I did say earlier that it doesn't have that much aesthetic, but there actually is one really cool scene in the club where they're all dancing and there's like rain falling on them. I think it's rain, unless it's one of these Berghain parties. And that was really stylistically really strong. It looked like something from a music video, but it also fit within the context of the film. So I watched it at a screening and was very blown away in the cinema by how it really hews to this man's perspective and lets him really explore and see what he's comfortable with sexually and not comfortable with, because there's all these different variations of sexual exploration that you can go for.
There is one part of it that I think is maybe a little, I don't want to say irresponsible, maybe a little underdeveloped, which is the scene where he is involved in, let's just say, like rough sex with two other guys, and it has a sort of like a S&M element to it and a cash slave element to it, and it kind of just comes out of nowhere, and these characters kind of come back later in the movie in a certain way, and I just felt like this part was a little vague in a certain way. How did you feel about it?
Yeah, I wasn't sure what to make of it, but the one scene that I really liked was when another man approaches him in I can't really say the smoking area of the club in Berlin, because in Berlin
it's the same guy.
Every area is the smoking area. And the guy's really short. And he asks the guy, why doesn't he like him? And he goes, you're too short. And it was just really mean and to the point. Actually, it wasn't mean, it was just very blunt. And there's this real sadness and rejection on the other man's face, which I thought was a really nicely handled scene.
But he was insistent. He asked twice for the truth. Our protagonist at first dodges the question and tries to be polite and not answer it. And then he really wants to know why he's not into him. And he just says, because you're too short. It's a revealing moment.
It's not the kind of thing you want to say to a person. It's a bit like coming out of a screening. For example, she came to me and the rep says, what do you think of the film? And you don't want to say anything mean, but you're not going to lie either, so you have to catch it and nice. She came to me, it was probably the worst opener of the Berlinale since forever. So Yes, Drifter is a decent film that's definitely worth seeking out and maybe complementing it in its depiction of the club scene, but moving towards London and of course Soho, is Femme, which apparently is very good. I haven't seen it yet, but Jared, can you tell us a little bit about Femme?
Sure. Femme is about a black drag queen who runs into a white man who attacked her while she was in drag, and she runs into him a few months later while she's out of drag in a gay sauna, and embarks on a interesting relationship with him.
While she's presenting as masculine.
While she's presenting as masculine,
Okay.
yes. He does not recognize her. She's presenting as normal cis boy in the sauna and cis man in the sauna, and things go down. And I think that the film's main problem is in the synopsis it gives a little bit too much away about what the film is about, and I would leave some of that out because it goes in a very interesting direction that I liked. I think it's a little bit problematic in certain ways that I don't really. Again, it's kind of hard to talk about this film without spoiling some of the more interesting parts of it, but it definitely has a problematic sort of not Stockholm syndrome thing to it, but getting close to someone who viciously and violently attacked you. And that's an interesting way to set your movie up.
So thumbs up or thumbs down?
Thumbs up, a big thumbs up for the first hour, but the ending didn't come together completely for me, but I still think it's a very, very provocative film. It reminded me a little bit of Lizzie Borden's film Love Crimes with Sean Young, which is about a DA who goes to the dark side of her sexuality. So I'm always really happy to see films that have the balls to try to do, to explore some of these very dark parts of human sexuality.
And another film that you said that you really liked was Opponent. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Opponent was great. It was it's about a Irani family that's moving to Sweden, and the father was involved in something in Iran that went terribly wrong, and that's why they've moved. And it slowly reveals, that he was in a homosexual relationship with another guy, and things sort of start happening again as he joins this wrestling club in his new town in Sweden.
And I forgot to mention that there is another very good British film in the Panorama called Silver Haze, which is also another queer film, this time focusing on a lesbian relationship between one woman who is the victim of a house fire, and she's a nurse in the NHS, and she's caring for a suicidal young girl, and they develop this really natural, interesting relationship, and it's all set in Margate or thereabouts, and it uses the sea a lot, but it doesn't engage in a lot of maybe the cliches I would consider British cinema to sort of be plagued by, but actually tells a very compelling and interesting story. The director, Sasha Pollack, she's from Holland, but she's really emerging as a really interesting voice in film. You saw Silver Haze as well.
I did, and I also really, really enjoyed it. I really like Silver Haze. I think it explores a lot of interesting themes, and the most interesting one for me was about sort of falling in love with the wrong person, and the sort of complexity of how maybe even the wrong person can sort of help you grow and bring you out of a certain shell. And there's a lot of other things going on in the film, about revenge and forgiveness and some family relation things that I think they all come together really nicely in this film. I think that Sasha really balances them really well and very confidently. So a huge recommendation for Silver Haze for me as well.
So as you can imagine, we're all very busy and need to rush to other screenings, but I'd also like to give a shout out to Sira, which is a really cool revenge film set in the Sahel in Africa, I think Burkina Faso, and it's not as badass as maybe people might describe it as, but it does build up to this amazing revenge conclusion. So finally, Jared, I just want to ask you, what do you think will win the Teddy Award for Best Queer Film?
I'm not sure, I think it's probably a political decision. I'm guessing maybe Drifter or Passages, or they could give it to Kokomo City or even Transfariana, which I don't think we've really covered, which is about a trans woman who falls in love with a FARC rebel in jail. It's a 2.5 hour long documentary. It's not the easiest watch, but I think that the Teddies like to try to award things that are highly political and so I think Transferiana has a good shot as well.
And that was a little quick live roundup of some of the films in the Panorama section. Tune in next time to see what we will talk about next.